At Camp Hearn, curators eased cedar planks to reveal a dust-sealed ledger dispelling refused breakfast legends. Its dawn entry lists 13 pounds of bacon, 6 skillets, a dented ladle, molasses, scented sugar. If this stirs you, please subscribe. If you cherish whispered history, subscribe. Before sunrise, Lupe Mendez wrapped a flour-dusted apron around her waist, the cotton cool against calloused skin. She coaxed the pot-belly stove alive with cedar kindling, each spark snapping softly like distant applause in the dim kitchen. The stove exhaled a low orange glow that painted the concrete floor with ripples resembling shallow river water. Bacon slabs, still damp from brown sugar brine, waited on a pine table, their edges slick enough to shine under lantern light. Lupe pressed her fingertips into the meat, feeling pepper granules cling, then wiped them on a towel scented of lard and lemon. The first strip met the skillet with a sigh, releasing a perfume of pecan smoke that curled lazily toward the rafters. She arranged the pieces in even ranks, listening to the grease pop in steady rhythms that matched her heartbeat. Between turns, she tapped a ladle against a bucket of grits, the metallic knot keeping time like a patient metronome. Outside, watchtower boots shuffled on gravel, yet inside the room the only power was the warmth pooling around Lupe's wrists. Steam coated the windows, turning the rising sun into a blurred halo that gilded her profile with quiet authority. She hummed a low corrido, the melody weaving through smoke and settling atop stacked tin trays awaiting disciplined hands. In that tender glow, the boundaries between host and captive thinned, suspended on the shimmer of breakfast taking shape. In that era of ration books, the quartermaster lifted a steel-nibbed pen that scratched like a cricket across lined paper as he recorded each delivery from Temple's packing plant, noting exact weights, arrival hours, and the driver's sweat-soaked collar. An enamel clock above his desk ticked steadily, measuring trust in metallic heartbeats, while the pen traced looping numerals revealing how order survived rationed mornings. Photographs preserved nearby show prisoners clutching tin trays, their faces slick with humidity as the bacon's glossy sheen beckoned from the counter, though harsh noon light bleaches the images. That glare still spares a faint gleam on each strip, suggesting sweetness thick enough to taste even decades later. American officers framed the meal as morale management, insisting that satiated senses would quiet restless thoughts before they hardened into schemes, and the archived air carries a latent smoke still hanging. Does the aroma of hickory lull vigilance faster than any shouted command? The query floats within the recorded silence held in rafters darkened by years of sizzling dawns, revealing how invisible supervision seasoned the room. Floorboards beneath exhibit varnish remain faintly oily, their texture betraying how grease seeped into grain no mop could purge, as the quartermaster's ink stains smell faintly of iron, a metallic echo of pans he never lifted though he controlled. Instead, his meticulous script pairs with the perfume trapped in the ledger, evidence as tangible as bullets lined in a box, with bureaucracy meanwhile stirring the skillet through unseen hands. Camp chaplain Father Albrecht carried a leather missal softened by years of incense, and it soon absorbed Texas smoke like a reluctant blessing. When he entered Lupe's kitchen, the turning spit cast amber reflections across his spectacles, two trembling suns dancing on polished glass. He murmured prayers while the bacon hissed, the sound mingling with his Latin syllables to form a cadence gentler than marching boots. The chaplain's fingers brushed condensing steam, leaving droplets that smelled faintly of pepper clinging to the pages of his book. Behind him, prisoners inhaled in unison, their shoulders lifting as the aroma wrapped around them like a woolen shawl remembered from home. Marginal notes in his diary described men breaking formation to lean closer, a breach of discipline omitted from official summaries. He later wrote that pride softened like rendered fat, sliding from rigid faces until only hunger and quiet gratitude remained. Silence held because the commandant feared headlines depicting enemy officers swooning over Texas hospitality, and questioned loyalty would ripple through towns. Yet the texture of that dawn lingers, pewter plates warming palms, grease glistening on lit corners, and prayers tasting faintly of maple. For generations, veterans recalled the tremor in their wrists as they tasted sweetness against memories of rye bread and rationed butter. Each retelling adds another layer to the sensory archive, proving that persuasion can arrive on a fork instead of a decree. Reflection settles softly here, suggesting comfort might be the most potent sermon a kitchen can preach. The sand remembers. Instruments hum. The hollow waits for footsteps, for whispers, for bacon-scented confession. Decades before prisoners marched through the mess line, chuck wagon cooks along the Chisholm Trail perfected the art of coaxing obedience with food. Their journals, stained with grease and grit, explain how to tilt a skillet exactly 17 degrees so fat pooled without scorching. When historians unfolded those brittle pages, the air filled with the scent of mesquite ash, rough and sweet, clinging to parchment like fine dust. Tin plates recovered from abandoned campsites bear concentric scars where knives scraped for the final savoury morsels under star-pricked skies. Drovers told campfire stories about feeding strangers to steward fragile truces, their voices low as embers flared against the prairie wind. The same spice blend, paprika, pepper, and a hint of molasses, later appeared stamped on military requisitions for prisoner-of-war kitchens. By tracing the recipes, scholars tasted continuity, realizing Texas hospitality learned on cattle trails slipped smoothly into wartime strategy. A broom dragged across the museum floor now echoes with phantom hoofbeats, the sound resonating through the mess hall's wooden ribs. Instead of swords, these cooks wielded sizzling skillets, believing comfort softened tempers faster than orders barked through a megaphone. Archival tins still smell of soot and bacon, proof that aroma can outlast the voices that once floated around the fire. The discovery binds frontier nights to guarded mornings, showing that persuasion rode the same wagons as salt and flour. Reflection rises with the smoke, asserting that hospitality has long been Texas's quiet bridle on stubborn hearts. Eric, a milliner's apprentice from Bremen, stitched a journal from flour sacks whose cloth remains crusted with salt from the kitchen air. His entries describe cicadas droning outside while the generator behind the mess hall rumbled like distant thunder feeding the refrigeration units. He sketched table arrangements with charcoal, noting how sunrise poured through east windows and turned bacon steam into gold-veiled curtains. The first bite shocked him with sugary smoke, a flavour that clung to his palate like memories of a baker's hearth. Between poems he pasted ration card scraps, their fibres rough beneath fingertips, validating each word with tangible grit. Eric confessed that the breakfast disarmed him more gently than threats, admitting in crooked script that desire felt perilously close to betrayal. He listened to spatulas tapping in rhythm, a percussion line soft enough to blur guard orders into background murmurs. Still, he hid the journal beneath loose floorboards, aware that guards seized sentimental contraband as swiftly as hidden tools. Centuries later, archivists warmed the fabric pages under a gentle lamp, coaxing out a faint aroma of pecan smoke. The grease stains shimmered under glass, their edges feathered like feathers on a hat he once crafted in Bremen. Holding the journal, researchers heard the mess hall's hush reassemble around them, the smell and sound guiding interpretation. Reflection drifts across the cloth, proving that a breakfast can be penned into memory as indelibly as any battlefield report. After the armistice, Eric's notebook slipped into a mislabeled museum box filed under agricultural reports, a bureaucratic error that muffled its voice. Dust layered over the cloth, trapping the scent until a curator wearing soft cotton gloves traced the faint sketch of bacon strips. She felt the raised charcoal ridges beneath her fingertips, the texture grating like fine sandpaper against latex. The discovery illuminated how easily stories of nourishment become eclipsed by louder tales of barbed wire, escapes, and disciplinary drills. In the hush of the archive, A dehumidifier thrummed, echoing the old ventilation fan that once guided smoke toward barracks windows. She whispered a question to the room. Are we prepared to accept breakfast as a strategic instrument and not mere kindness? The query hovered in the chilled air, mingling with the faint aroma released as she gently flexed the cloth hinges. Accident, rather than conspiracy, preserved the secret. Silence settled simply because no one thought to look beneath the wrong label. Once catalogued correctly, the notebook's grease patterns mirrored entries in supply ledgers, forming a sensory bridge between memory and measurement. The curator recorded the temperature of the room, the angle of lamplight, and the soft crackle as dry fibers awakened. Her report smells faintly of lavender hand cream, a modern scent mingling with historic smoke in delicate balance. Reflection glows in that small office, proof that rediscovery sometimes arrives on the quiet rustle of shuffled folders. A Swiss Red Cross inspector toured Camp Herne, carrying a notebook perfumed by train coal soot that clung to his wool coat. He observed sunlight pouring through screened windows, trapping bacon steam in luminous pillars that resembled incense in an alpine chapel. His report, typed on onion skin paper, specifies wire gauge measurements, room temperatures, and the precise cadence of utensils striking enamel. Between statistics, he described cinnamon drifting over scalding coffee, the scent braiding with bacon into a tapestry of unexpected comfort. He contrasted this abundance with austere rye porridge served in European stalags, concluding that American hospitality was a calculated message. His typewriter ribbon faltered mid-sentence, the faintly faded letters suggesting trembling hands as he recorded prisoners closing their eyes to savor. The document was stamped confidential, folded carefully into a diplomatic pouch, and hidden to avoid accusations of enemy pampering. Decades later, scholars unfurled the pages, the paper crackling like thin ice and releasing a smoky residue trapped within fibers. Under ultraviolet light, grease fingerprints surfaced as silver glimmers, accidental signatures proving his inspection engaged every sense. The report remained silent out of reverence for neutrality, an intentional hush protecting fragile diplomatic balance. Now, its words resonate with the same gentle insistence as the hiss of bacon on iron. Reflection descends softly, reminding us that objectivity can smell like pecan smoke when truth mingles with taste. Mechanical drawings seized from the maintenance shed depict oven baffles, engineered to spread heat evenly, a banquet-level refinement for a prison kitchen. Graphite smudges on vellum still smell faintly of machine oil, evidence of hands that balanced wrenches and pencils with equal precision. Annotations specify how frequently to flip each strip so edges stayed flat, prescribing a choreography of spatulas like dancers on metal stages. Engineers noted ceiling fan rotations designed to steer smoke along calculated paths, ensuring aroma drifted toward barracks before the bugle sounded. When preservationists reconstructed the system using period stoves, the room glowed in bronze light while grease whispered against iron. Researchers closed their eyes involuntarily, lulled by the warmth radiating into their palms as they gripped the skillet handles. The experiment proved deliberate design, persuasion engineered through airflow, temperature, and timing, rather than left to chance. Silence cloaked the findings because acknowledging such intention blurred lines between security operations and hospitality. Scorch marks on recovered floorboards align perfectly with blueprint measurements, creating a tactile map for modern fingers to trace. Even the screws smell faintly of smoke, their threads stained by years of culinary campaigns. The tools of industry merged with the art of cooking, making the mess hall a laboratory of influence. Reflection hums through the ventilators, suggesting that infrastructure can cradle emotion as tenderly as any lullaby. Moths settle on ledgers, vent fans sigh. Memory tastes of salt, cedar, and promises held low tonight. Centuries earlier, Saxon farmhouse kitchens hung juniper-cured bacon beneath oak beams, stained brown by endless winters of smoke. Ethnographers collecting recipes wrote about slabs brushed with honeyed beer, their surfaces tacky and fragrant beneath candlelight. Hosts pressed warm slices into travelers' palms, sealing truces over tables that creaked like settling snowdrifts. These manuscripts still smell faintly of cloves and damp straw, scents released when archivists lift linen covers. Emigrant families packed such volumes beside hymnals, lining trunks with waxed paper that carried the aroma across storm-tossed Atlantic nights. In Texas settlements, German-speaking cooks fused old techniques with pecan wood, creating a nuttier perfume that clung to stone hearths. Their letters home described dawn mist glowing pink while bacon crackled, the sound mingling with meadowlark calls. For generations, offering smoked meat signified welcome, a quiet pledge of safety exchanged before words addressed politics or prayer. The tradition drifted into municipal festivals, where bandstands smelled of grease, while brass instruments gleamed beneath fairy lights. These layers explain why comfort and control entwined so naturally once war cast shadows over the state. Each preserved recipe page holds grease halos, tactile reminders that culture is often written in salt and smoke. Reflection settles like rising steam, affirming that diplomacy can begin with a sizzling pan long before treaties find parchment. Frontier diaries tell of German settlers meeting Comanche traders beside the Guadalupe, fires crackling low beneath sprawling pecan branches. They warmed strips of cured pork over mesquite embers, the fat dripping onto river stones that hissed softly into twilight. Fireflies brushed the smoke, their light flickering in sync with drumbeats echoing from distant camps. One diarist described receiving a beaded necklace smelling of sage and caballo sweat, traded alongside smoked meat glistening with sorghum. He kept the beads wrapped in chamois, the leather now perfumed with mingled smoke and prairie rain. Out of reverence, settlers omitted these meetings from public letters, fearing gossip might shatter fragile understandings. Yet private journals record the taste of pepper and wild honey lingering on tongues as agreements unfolded. The night air cooled their forearms, and sparks floated up like prayers, fusing caution and hope in equal measure. These encounters taught communities that hospitality could wield more influence than muskets glinting in moonlight. The silence surrounding them was voluntary, a hush meant to protect a delicate braid of trust. When historians read these entries, they smelled dried sage pressed between pages, confirmation that diplomacy once wore the scent of bacon. Reflection flows with the Guadalupe, revealing how earlier negotiations seasoned later wartime strategies. During wartime shortages, agricultural agent Ruth Holloway drove Caliche roads at dawn, her pickup rattling while cedar dust perfumed the cab. She carried a cedar clipboard that smelled of resin and ink, resting it against smokehouse doors slick with condensation. Ruth timed curing cycles with a stopwatch, noting humidity levels as pork sides glistened under low blue lamps. She dabbed linen squares against the meat to test viscosity, feeling the warm grease bloom across her fingertips. Her notes specify slice thickness down to a fraction, insisting uniformity mattered for morale as much as nutrition. She documented the crunch of gravel under boots and the distant moan of cattle awaiting their own morning feed. In her private diary, she pressed a rosemary sprig between pages, the herb's peppery scent mingling with the lingering smoke. She wondered quietly whether such meticulous care blurred lines between compassion and manipulation. Supervisors suppressed her diary excerpts, worried public opinion might bristle at tenderness extended toward enemy soldiers. The official reports remain sterile, yet the paper carries faint greasy fingerprints, accidental confessions of sensory involvement. Holding those pages today, historians feel the grain of the cedar clipboard as if Ruth's steady hand still guided the pencil. Reflection breathes through her records, acknowledging that logistics and lullabies sometimes share the same ledger column. A radio engineer in Bryan recorded the camp kitchen at dawn, capturing the clink of utensils and low simmer of grits on acetate discs. He layered those sounds beneath farm reports, broadcasting a gentle symphony of sizzling fat across kitchen radios statewide. Listeners heard the hiss and pop without realizing German prisoners stood just beyond the microphone's reach. Postcards arrived praising the comforting ambience, their paper smelling of perfumed stationery and pantry spices. The engineer stored the discs in a shoebox, where vinegar-scented acetate mingled with traces of bacon smoke. He feared reprimand, so he never confessed that his soothing soundtrack came from within a guarded fence. The broadcasts demonstrate how the meal's aura seeped into civilian homes, easing ration fatigue with borrowed warmth. When archivists replayed the discs, static crackled like frying fat while cicadas hummed faintly in the background. Hearing the layered soundscape, researchers felt their shoulders loosen, as if the aroma had returned alongside the melody. The silence surrounding the origin stemmed from cautious loyalty, a desire to comfort without exposing security lapses. Now, the recordings serve as audible evidence that persuasion travels further than mess hall walls. Reflection lingers in the studio, suggesting that even airwaves can carry the flavor of strategy. When prisoners sailed home, many tucked grease-marked recipe scraps into their kit bags, the paper translucent with preserved fat. In Bremen, Eric's cousin Lise unfolded a pecan-scented note and felt Texas warmth rise from the delicate sheet. She brushed bacon drippings over morning rolls, the glaze caramelizing into a crunchy shell that perfumed her bakery before dawn. Customers tasted smoke and sweetness, their breath fogging the windows while winter wind rattled the panes. When asked about the flavor, Liesse said only that distant kitchens had taught her how solace could loosen sorrow. Municipal authorities warned citizens against romanticizing enemy comforts, so she hid the recipe inside a family Bible. Oil stains spread across the thin pages, cementing the connection between scripture and skillet. At family gatherings, the loaf anchored conversations, each slice releasing a faint whisper of Texas mesquite into the parlor. Children grew up associating reconciliation with the crackle of bacon bits inside tender crumbs. Their elders kept the story quiet, silence motivated by post-war austerity and respect for complex loyalties. Yet the flavor persisted, a sensory bridge spanning oceans and ideologies. Reflection curls from the oven door, proving that taste can outpace politics. Low flames murmur. Pages breathe. Bacon's echo drifts between languages, soothing and unsettling every listening heart. Archaeologists mapped the collapsed mess hall using grid lines, their trowels scraping through soil layers linked to the sweltering summer of 1943. They unearthed charred bacon rinds curled like dried leaves, measuring thickness with calipers to compare against ledger entries. The excavation trench smelled briefly of damp ash and resurgent smoke, as if the grease had been waiting to breathe. Volunteers lifted skillet fragments mottled with iron rust and slick residue, feeling history stick to their gloves. Sunlight pierced the exposed beams, casting golden slants that illuminated each glistening scrap before the breeze cooled it. Field notes recorded humidity levels, insect calls, and the precise angle of shadows at the moment artifacts emerged. Birdsong blended with the faint hiss imagined from the past, filling the site with layered sound. The archaeologists paused, acknowledging that a breakfast once dismissed as rumor had carved itself into earth. Photographs capture sweat beads on their temples, mirroring the grease droplets they documented meticulously. The findings dovetailed with Ruth's charts, aligning numbers, textures, and aromas into a cohesive narrative. Silence followed, not from suppression but from reverent awe at the intimate relics resting in their palms. Reflection settles like sifting soil, affirming that even hunger leaves fossils. Army public relations officers typed communiques in offices, fogged with cigarette smoke and stale coffee, the air buzzing with tension. They struck out any mention of lavish breakfasts, red pencils scraping across carbon copies with sharp, impatient strokes. Instead, they highlighted calisthenics, work details, and the clank of tools, constructing narratives of stern efficiency. Inside a safe, meal plans remained stacked neatly, their edges slick where Lupe's thumb had pressed while flipping pages. When opened decades later, those sheets released a faint maple aroma that settled over the archive like a confession. Grease halos around menu items glowed under ultraviolet light, ghostly rings. None of the officers could entirely erase. The suppression stemmed from fear that families would accuse the camp of coddling enemies while rationing affected locals. Yet the very act of redaction amplified whispers among guards, who remembered the sweet smoke curling past their collars. The office walls, still stained nicotine yellow, seemed to absorb the scent each time the files are displayed. Present-day researchers feel the textured paper under fingertips, embossed slightly where pencils once pressed in frustration. Silence hangs thick, a bureaucratic hush seasoned unintentionally by lingering bacon. Reflection glides through that room, observing how omission can never fully mask aroma. Schoolteacher Pearl Atkins volunteered at the History Centre, her curiosity guiding her through boxes that smelled of cardboard and old starch. She noticed a repeating grease print on every fourth meal plan page, a left-handed smudge darkening the margins like a shadow. Payroll ledgers confirmed Lupe's left-handed grip, aligning the fingerprint with the cook's daily authority. Pearl warmed the pages beneath gentle lamps, watching faint smoke tendrils seem to rise as air shifted. Community elders gathered as she presented the documents, their eyes glistening while the room filled with revived scent. They recalled dawn shifts, when the air tasted of salt and possibility, memories tingling along their tongues. Pearl wrote an essay describing how the breakfast coaxed cooperation, pairing tactile observations with softened prose. Her words flowed like lullabies, yet rested on measurable evidence, temperatures, portion sizes, and the cadence of spatulas. The essay circulated quietly among teachers, its pages perfumed with chalk dust and trace grease. Out of respect for wartime modesty, she avoided public lectures, letting the documents speak in their own centered language. In archives today, her annotated margins guide researchers to small stains easily overlooked. Reflection sparkles in the lamplight, acknowledging that patient observation can resurrect a vanished aroma. A retired guard invited Pearl to his porch, handing her a dented tin mug polished with lard until it gleamed. He described how the morning after that first feast, the barracks felt wrapped in cotton, footsteps muffled against wooden planks. The mug smelled of old coffee and cooled grease, a mixture that transported him instantly to the steaming mess line. He confessed that he had kept the vessel hidden in a cedar chest, fearing mockery for cherishing an enemy's breakfast. As he spoke, cicadas throbbed in the live oaks, echoing the kitchen's sizzling tempo. His silence had been born of awe, a reluctance to admit that kindness had unsettled his stern demeanour. Is it possible that fragrant hospitality disarmed him more fully than target practice? The query drifted between them, blending with the scent of hay and distant chimney smoke. Pearl noted the tremor in his voice, the scrape of chair legs on the porch, and the way his fingers stroked the mug's rim. She later described the scene in her journal, the ink smelling faintly of cedar sap. The testimony added a human pulse to archival numbers, a heartbeat tempered by bacon. Reflection settles on that porch, where breeze and memory intertwine. Comparative research led historians to Huntsville Penitentiary records, where cooks once wielded aroma as deftly as guards carried batons. Massive iron kettles simmered with pork trimmings, their steam curling into rafters blackened with tar and soot. Prisoners described the scent as a velvet rope guiding them quietly into line, even before whistles blew. The cook's logs, speckled with flour, detail thermometer readings and spice ratios meant to coax compliance. Sketches in the margins depict ladles, heat gauges, and hands turning meat with almost ceremonial care. When researchers ran fingers across the graphite, it smudged onto skin, gritty reminders of labour-intensive persuasion. Connecting these practices to Camp Hearn, created a loop of strategy stretching across institutions. The sound of sizzling echoed through both histories, a shared soundtrack of managed mercy. Silence cloaked the similarities because officials preferred narratives of stern discipline over nuanced hospitality. Yet the archives smell the same: smoke, sweat, and pepper lingering beneath the paper. The comparison underscores how comfort can be as regimented as punishment. Reflection hums like the kettles, insistently gentle. Grease gleams in memory. Archival drawers murmur. Night blooming Sirius perfumes the air around forgotten ledgers. Camp psychologists conducted discreet observations, clutching scent charts normally used by advertisers to measure consumer reactions. They recorded pupil dilation as bacon aromas intensified, correlating responses with the cadence of spatulas scraping iron. Their clipboard paper smelled of newsprint and faint grease, betraying their proximity to the steaming skillets. Notes detail the warmth of plates pressing into palms, the tactile comfort that loosened jawlines. They listened to conversations soften into murmurs, the soundscape settling like feathers. Graph lines plotted compliance rates alongside serving times, transforming flavor into data points. The psychologists concluded that sensory saturation eased resistance more effectively than stern lectures. Their reports remained locked away, silence motivated by professional caution and fear of ethical scrutiny. When the folders reopened, ink had bled slightly, creating smoky halos around each observation. The pages crackled under researchers' fingers, releasing a sweet salty scent preserved between sheets. Empirical evidence and aroma intertwined, undeniable even when words demurred. Reflection pulses in those graphs, proving that emotion can be measured in scented breaths. Volunteer cook Ida May wrote letters describing the mess hall's acoustics, how sizzling fat bounced off tin walls like soft rain. Cornmeal dust clung to her forearms, leaving a fine grit she compared to beach sand warmed by sun. She remembered prisoners exhaling together when the first tray appeared, the air tasting of caramelized pepper and anticipation. Her letter rested for decades in a recipe box alongside vanilla beans, absorbing sweet and smoky perfumes. Ida May described potholders damp with steam, threads rough against her palms as she lifted heavy pans. She admitted that feeding the enemy felt like braiding warmth into barbed wire, a paradox she carried home each night. Silence shielded her story, chosen to honor husbands fighting abroad who might misread compassion as disloyalty. Now, under museum lights, the ink glints while the faint scent of lard still clings to paper fibers. Her words provide tactile detail missing from official accounts, grounding strategy in human hands. Reading the letter, one hears the clatter of ladles, the whisper of aprons brushing against rough tables. Emotion and fact mingle, neither overpowering the other. Reflection lingers like steam, gentle yet persistent. In Hamburg, a small literary magazine printed a poem about a distant dawn where bacon sang like cicadas. The verses describe smoke mingling with snow memories, weaving warmth and chill into a single exhale. Archivists traced the author to Eric's Circle, noting offhand references to tin cups chiming like church bells. The paper carries a faint tobacco scent, perhaps from fingers stained during late-night revisions. Grease marks glimmer between lines, subtle proof that the poet touched the page after handling breakfast. Readers assumed allegory, unaware the imagery encoded a real morning that softened hardened men. The poet avoided specifics, silence chosen to protect friends from accusations of romanticizing captivity. Yet the sensory detail betrays authenticity, lips shining, steam swirling in loops, taste lingering like a hymn. Critics praised the piece for quiet dignity, never detecting the whisper of Camp Hearn within the metaphors. Decades later, translation reveals the cadence mirrors Lupe's hummed corrido. The poem now stands as evidence wrapped in art. Reflection breathes between stanzas, inviting readers to taste what words only suggest. Austin chef Marcel set out to recreate the menu, spreading ledger photocopies across a counter dusted with cornmeal. He weighed 13 pounds, 4 ounces of bacon, aligning exactly with the commissary entry discovered beneath cedar planks. Digital thermometers monitored skillets while vintage gramophones played reconstructed kitchen hums. He invited diners to hold warmed tin plates, their palms tingling as steam kissed skin. Lights dimmed to mimic dawn, casting amber halos over tables while pecan smoke drifted from concealed vents. Guests heard the soft clink of utensils looping through hidden speakers, an auditory embrace. When they tasted the first bite, sweetness and salt flooded their mouths, provoking unbidden sighs. Marcel watched shoulders drop, noting how the room settled into hushed conversation. He shared that he sought to understand how flavor could dismantle resolve without a single shouted order. Silence followed the meal, contemplative rather than empty, as diners imagined sentries and prisoners sharing the same smell. The pop-up event documented reactions, pairing sensory impressions with internal reflections. Reflection glimmers in the modern dining room, proving history can be plated and savored anew. Camp Hearn's museum hosts an exhibit called The Quiet Skillet, guiding visitors through evidence arranged along a softly lit corridor. Display cases bathe ledger pages, skillet fragments, and the blue twine in amber light that mimics sunrise. A discreet diffuser releases pecan smoke, so the air tastes faintly sweet as guests lean closer to read labels. Hidden speakers emit the hiss of frying, layered with cicadas and muted voices collected from oral histories. Visitors lift replica pans, feeling the heavy handles rough against their palms. Interactive panels invite them to trace grease halos with gloved fingers, the texture slightly tacky even in reproduction. Reflective prompts ask how hospitality becomes strategy, encouraging eyes to linger on the 13-pound notation that opened this narrative. Children sketch the exhibit, crayons scratching quietly while the scent settles into their hair. Elderly visitors close their eyes, swaying gently as memories bloom. The gallery walls, painted warm clay, seem to absorb the smoke and hold it like a secret. Docents speak in hushed tones, letting the sensory environment carry most of the story. Reflection hovers in that space, patient as the lingering aroma. Lights dim. Bacon ghosts shimmer. Breath flows in, slow and salted, out, softer than before. Digital humanists scanned the ledger with hyperspectral imaging, their lab humming with equipment that smelled faintly of ozone and coffee. The process revealed hidden annotations, tiny pencil stars beside prisoners who returned for second helpings. Data mapped appetite against disciplinary records, converting aroma memories into glowing constellations on a screen. Blue light washed over the researchers' faces as graphs pulsed like heartbeat monitors. They traced Lupe's looping script with fingertips pressed against glass, feeling the cool barrier resist warmth. Each scan captured minute grease crystals sparkling like frost under magnification. The team logged ambient temperature, machine frequency, and even the faint hum of ventilation systems. Analysis confirmed that the breakfast's impact reached beyond stories into measurable patterns of calm. Outside the lab, the tale remained muted, perhaps because data feels too clinical to describe something so fragrant. Still, the digital files carry embedded scents in memory, triggered whenever researchers recall the lab's warm coffee. The project bridges tactile history with pixelated evidence. Reflection radiates from the monitors, proving numbers can cradle tenderness. Prisoners painted watercolor postcards portraying Bavarian meadows, yet subtle details betray Texas mornings slipping into their dreams. One card shows a farmhouse kitchen bathed in honeyed light, a square griddle occupying the hearth instead of traditional round pans. Smoke curls in parallel bands, mimicking the camp's ventilation patterns more than alpine chimneys. The pigments smell faintly of glue and tobacco, hinting at late-night mixing amid barracks murmurs. Conservators note waxy patches where fingers slick with grease pressed too heavily. The card's paper feels smooth, except for those spots, textured proof of culinary nostalgia. Perhaps the artist unconsciously fused hunger and homeland, making bacon's steam the new outline of memory. Does the blending of landscapes reveal how flavors redraw identity? The question hovers as light strikes the watercolor, turning smoke trails silver. Family albums hid the postcard to avoid accusations of longing for captivity's comforts. Now, displayed beside the ledger, it glows softly, aligning art with aroma. Reflection ripples across the painted sky, inviting viewers to taste with their eyes. The camp's kennel master kept a log bound in leather smelling of wet fur and bacon-slick collars. He noticed that guard dogs paced slowly whenever morning smoke drifted across the yard, their growls dissolving into soft whines. His notes detail ear positions, tail measurements, and the exact minute the scent reached each kennel. He wrote that the aroma coated their tongues, leaving them licking the air like pups beside a hearth. Fearing ridicule, he locked the log in a footlocker buried beneath army blankets. When opened decades later, the hinges felt greasy, residue seeping through fabric despite careful storage. The pages are translucent at the edges, grease diffusing through fibers like lantern light through paper. The dog's surrender mirrors the prisoner's softened stances, evidence that Bacon's spells spared no creature. Silence surrounded the log, because acknowledging docile dogs might imply lax security. The rediscovery now enriches the narrative, adding paws and wet noses to the scene. Readers can almost hear gentle panting blending with skillet hiss. Reflection curls its tail around the story, tender as a sleeping hound. Folklorists recording Texas lullabies found a tune that mimics the tempo of sizzling fat, short pops, followed by lingering sighs. Singers described night air thick with pepper and sweet smoke slipping beneath wooden doors. Recording sessions took place in living rooms lit by oil lamps, the glass chimneys fogged by breath. Elderly voices carried a softness seasoned by decades of dawn labor. The researchers realized the melody matched Lupe's corrido, preserved unconsciously by ears that once lingered near the kitchen. Sheet music smells of camphor from the trunks where it slept, mingling with faint bacon traces clinging to memory. Lyrics promise safety, promising that sizzling pans will guard children from thunder. Families guarded the song, silence rooted in affection for its private comfort. Now, archived wax cylinders blend gentle humming with background crackles resembling grease. Listening, one senses the mess hall's warmth returning, even as sleepers drift toward dreams. The lullaby shows how strategy became cradle song. Reflection sways with the rhythm, slow and comforting. Kenji, a Japanese-American internee temporarily assigned to the kitchen, wrote letters on thin stationery that rustles like leaves. He compared bacon fat sliding across the griddle to silk brushed with oil, noting the sheen beneath lantern light. Origami cranes folded from butcher paper lined his bunk, their wings perfumed with smoke. He described dawn light filtering through windows, turning steam lavender as it mingled with dust motes. He observed German prisoners closing their eyes when inhaling, shoulders loosening as condensed vapor kissed their faces. Kenji recognized the tactic from assembly centers where comfort food quieted restless crowds. Yet he kept his insight private, silence chosen to avoid accusations of divided loyalty. His letter still carries a smoky tang, the fibers stiff where grease touched. Reading his words, one imagines his hands guiding spatulas with meticulous grace. He framed the experience as a meditation on shared captivity, each bite bridging cultural divides. The letter's edges glow sepia, recalling lantern light reflected off steel counters. Reflection bows gently, honoring intertwined histories. Steam curls, gentle. Dawn expands. Stories lie warm beneath skillets, unspoken yet breathing slow tonight. Military trainers from nearby bases inspected the camp, their boots tapping on concrete like muted drums. They expected rigidity, yet the air smelled of maple and smoke. more Sunday brunch than wartime austerity. They counted steps, measured posture, and watched prisoners move with languid grace softened by full stomachs. Sweat mingled with the aroma, leaving a metallic tang on lips as clipboards filled with tidy check marks. One trainer noted the lull in voices, remarking that conversations drifted rather than snapped. His recommendation suggested reallocating rations to sterner fare, yet the memo vanished into filing cabinets. Administrators valued the calm, choosing to keep the bacon despite whispered complaints. Cicadas hummed outside, blending with the persistent hiss of kitchen burners. The inspection room still smells faintly of shoe polish and smoke whenever the documents are reviewed. Silence afterwards stemmed from convenience more than conspiracy. Success demanded no explanation. The sensory memory of that visit lingers on scuffed floors and in the notebook's smudged margins. Reflection leans against the concrete wall, amused by authority soothed into acquiescence. A contemporary chemist scraped residue from skillet fragments and carried them into a lab humming with fluorescent lights. Solvents released sharp odors that mingled with faint smoke. The fragments still exhaled when warmed. Gas chromatography translated the scent into peaks, revealing compounds from pecan wood, molasses and sage. As the machine clicked, the chemist imagined Lupe's practiced hands sprinkling herbs. The printout curled warmly, edges tinted sepia by the instrument's heat. He documented every parameter, room temperature, solvent ratios, and the hum frequency of the analyzer. The data confirmed oral histories, anchoring memory in measurable chemistry. He stored samples in glass vials that trapped the aroma like genie-bottled nostalgia. Silence surrounds the study, because academic journals rarely publish articles about persuasion cooked in bacon grease. Yet colleagues who sniff the vials smile involuntarily, their expressions softening. The experiment proves that taste can leave a scientific fingerprint. Reflection flickers in the chromatogram peaks, gentle as rising steam. In the Federal Archive at Koblenz, a journalist uncovered censorship memos smelling of iron gall ink and aged leather. German authorities had blacked out culinary references from letters sent by Camp Herne prisoners, fearing morale erosion. Broad brushstrokes masked paragraphs where bacon likely shimmered in memory. By tilting the paper, faint indentations reveal the curves of forbidden words. The journalist, wearing linen gloves, traced those grooves, feeling texture like healed scars. Silence was bureaucratic, imposed to preserve austerity. Photographs of the redactions show streaks of grease bleeding through, defying the censor's ink. The documents emit a faint smoky scent despite decades in climate control. Readers sense the missing sentences through aroma rather than sight. Rediscovery here comes from absence, a negative space filled with imagined sizzling. The memos now sit beside unredacted letters, the juxtaposition smelling of both ink and bacon. Reflection rests in the gaps, acknowledging that erasure can never fully silence flavor. Cultural historians now gather in softly lit symposium halls to discuss the breakfast's ethical resonance. Diffusers release hints of maple and cedar, enveloping the audience in reconstructed scent. Slides display ledgers, blueprints, and diary fragments, while microphones capture voices softened by curiosity. Panelists sip smoked tea infusions, the warmth coating tongues as they debate hospitality's power. Some argue for recognizing the meal as intangible heritage, honoring complexity rather than triumph. Others worry about romanticizing captivity, their words floating through air that tastes faintly sweet. Audience members take notes on paper smelling of fresh ink and faint smoke. Questions emerge about responsibility when kindness serves strategy. Silence follows each session, a respectful pause scented with lingering pecan. The conferences knit scholarship with sensation, allowing evidence to resonate through multiple senses. Outside, evening breezes carry traces of food trucks grilling nearby, blending present with past. Reflection lingers in the foyer, suspended like aroma caught in velvet curtains. A sleep researcher interviewed descendants of the prisoners in a dim room washed with blue light. White noise machines sighed softly, reminiscent of the ventilation fans that once guided smoke. Participants held wool blankets, the texture echoing barracks bedding. They described dreams scented with bacon and cedar, dreams that left them waking hungry yet uneasy. Monitors tracked pulse rates, which steadied as memories unfolded. Each account included sensory detail, amber light glinting on enamel cups, warmth radiating toward faces. The researcher noted the taste of pepper lingering on tongues even in recollection. Recordings capture the rustle of blankets and quiet breaths. The study remains unpublished at participants' request, silence chosen out of respect for intimate reverie. Still, the data reveal that the breakfast seeped into subconscious landscapes. Dreams carried the aroma further than any train ride. Reflection curls at the bedside, patient as night. Night deepens. Bacon's echo lingers. Sleep listens for the faint clatter of enamel in the dark. Across ledgers, blueprints, diaries, lullabies, and chromatograms, the breakfast emerges as a carefully tuned instrument. Every discovery begins with sensory proof, numbers smelling of molasses, metal warm against palms, smoke glowing in photographs. Suppression follows swiftly. Redacted letters, sealed files, quiet porches where recollections waited decades. Rediscovery arrives through archaeologists' calipers, digital scans, and chefs recreating the aroma for modern palates. 13 pounds, 4 ounces becomes more than a notation. It is a pulse beating beneath every testimony. Smoke slips between eras, binding cattle trails, prison fences, and symposium halls. The bacon's hiss echoes in songs, dreams, and the softened eyes of guards and captives alike. Questions asked in archives drift upward like steam, respectful and unresolved. The motif from the excavated ledger now blankets the entire narrative, warm as dawn pressing through fog. Evidence and reflection intertwine, refusing to separate fact from feeling. The breakfast that broke them did so gently, droplet by droplet of shimmering grease. Reflection deepens, inviting listeners to hold the warmth without claiming certainty. Now, night settles over the preserved mess hall, cicadas pulsing like distant skillets in the heavy air. Lamplight glows against the ledger's glass, and the recreated scent of pecan smoke threads through rafters with patient grace. A guard's tin mug catches moonlight, its dented rim still holding a faint oily sheen, no polish removes. The breeze slipping through cracked windows tastes of cedar, dust, and journeys carried across oceans in secret recipes. Scholars lean close, notebooks resting on display cases, absorbing the soft scrape of imagined spatulas counting out time. Visitors inhale gently, palms hovering over ghostly warmth that radiates from memory more than from any hidden heater. Somewhere beyond the exhibits, a lullaby shaped by bacon's cadence drifts through sleepy doorways. Dreams gather at the threshold, uncertain whether they belong to guards, prisoners, or those who simply listen. Smoke curls toward darkness, carrying questions that glow and fade like embers on invisible wind. Perhaps another archive drawer, another cautious narrator, will someday add a new scent to this layered tale. Until then, the skillet remains warm in imagination, balanced between myth and measurement. The story continues to simmer,